All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is our last Red Barn event of the season. We don't start up again until next September, so we kind of have a break here in the summertime. So this is a wonderful way to end it with Julie coming. So we're really excited about that. This is a hybrid event, and all that means is you all are here in person to hear, and then we also have folks that are online that get to watch it. And so that just means we're mic'd up for that. And then later on when we have questions, we'll be walking around so that everyone can be interactive online as well as here in person. So the Red Barn events are a program, a community program of the Wenatchi River Institute. And the Wenatchi River Institute is a nonprofit, and our mission is to connect people, communities, and the natural world. And so we do this through youth programming that we have here on campus, as well as traveling naturalists. And then we also have the community programs such as this one, nature walks, and then maybe some of you also attended our Bird Fest last weekend. So that's all part of our community programs. We start all of our activities and events with a land acknowledgement. And so I'm going to read that land acknowledgement. This land acknowledgement was created alongside the Shimpetsquatsu people, and we are spreading the message that they wish to be spread to the public. The land the Wenatchi River Institute sits on is the ancestral homelands of the Shimpetsquatsu, Pasquota, or Wenatchi people. The Shimpetsquatsu, meaning people in between, had villages positioned along the Wenatchi River and surrounding areas. Their ancestral Cascade Ridge now live on the Colville Reservation. And we can see the red outline of where the Colville Reservation is compared to where Wenatchi. The Shimpetsquatsu people are still alive today. They continue to practice, oh, I already read that, didn't I? I'm sorry, no, I didn't. They continue to practice their culture, harvest their traditional foods and medicines, and hold their ceremonies passed down from their ancestors. Most people won't see or notice them, but they continue to be on the land they are connected to. Their traditional language is Nhampchin, an interior Salish dialect, and we'd like to welcome you all by saying hello in that language, Tilhusht. Tilhusht. We offer this land acknowledgement as the first step to amplifying Indigenous voices and recognizing the harm done to them as a people. We stand as an ally to recognize their connection to the land and their rights to practice their culture on these sacred lands. We encourage all to learn about the Indigenous peoples of the place you now call home. The Wenatchi River Institute is committed to sharing this land acknowledgement and following up with other actions to educate and be respectful. Sorry. So for these Red Barn events, we have our sponsors. And so we just want to make sure that we recognize our sponsors. Our major sponsors are the Leavenworth Chamber of Commerce, North Central Washington Audubon Society, the Rhine House, South Restaurants, Sage Mountain Natural Foods, Ludwig's German Restaurant, and the Icicle Brewing. And our other sponsors are the Wild Birds Unlimited in Wenatchi, the Sweets on Main, Visconti's Italian Restaurant, Cured by Visconti, The Bubblery, Gibbs Graphics, Leavenworth, Rad Tours, and Bruner's Lodge. And this event is a collaboration with the Leavenworth Museum. And so there's a lot going on down there. And so I'm going to welcome Matt to come on up and tell you a little bit more about the museum.
Thank you, Joshua, for that introduction. and welcome everyone to this program today. Thank you for coming. It is, as Joshua said, it's a joint project program with the Wenatchi River Institute and the Greater Leavenworth Museum. My name is Matt Cade, and I'm the president of the Greater Leavenworth Museum. The Wenatchi, WRI and the Greater Leavenworth Museum are delighted to share this opportunity with you to hear from Julie and learn about her journey of becoming a storyteller and basket weaver. Julie grew up on the Yakama reservation with her grandmother, and her grandmother taught her the traditional and cultural ways of her family. These stories are ones that you'll hear are ones that have been around for as long as the first peoples have been here. 6 months ago, the Greater Leavenworth Museum added, oh yes, there it is, added the exhibit of Julie's story baskets, which you can see up here, and that's Julie right there. But we're glad to have that at our museum. That was just added here within, again, back in December through a lot of effort. I'll get to that part, but first I wanted to just read a compliment that I picked up out of the Tribal Tribune magazine, and it's quoting a Colville council member complimenting Julie and her baskets. And when she said, "What an amazing display, so beautiful and awesome. Art, especially basket weaving, represents generations of social and cultural resiliency. Baskets are heirlooms of our past, present, and future. When you do something wonderful, the wonder ripples back to our community threefold." And I just thought that was just a nice compliment and very welcoming tribute to that. And we were so thrilled. It was just nice to know that you're getting that acknowledgement from your own community, Julie, as we've enjoyed having it at our museum. And I'm going to diverge from this written script. Oh, Carol's back there. My wife is saying no, but I will. People come to the museum. This is the anecdotal thing that pops out of these meetings, and I feel like I'm among friends. People come to our museum and they see the exhibit, which I'll share a picture of how limited it is and what it's going to become, or our idea for where we're going. And people ask the question, where are the Piscosa people now? Julie's baskets here represents telling them that they are still here today. And it's very warming when it talks about, there's a panel, which I won't share with, I don't want to embarrass Julie because it's very complimentary in the museum telling about her and the fact that the Piscosa people are here today and they do exist. And we're going to be expanding our own exhibit here. We have plans for that, which I'll go through again. But the theme of it is past and present, but it's also welcoming people to the community. So I think it'll be a very good joint venture with the tribal members so that we can share that story with visitors and residents here. So we want to compliment a couple of people that were very instrumental in allowing this basket story to be paid for, because as we always told our board, we have three ingredients that are needed for an exhibit to happen. One is time, space, and money. And money was an item that fortunately Mara Bowman and her husband, Brian, and Guru Boer and Bruce Williams donated to help make this exhibit possible, which we're very thankful for. We have some monies also that are going to help us as we progress in developing other parts of that exhibit to also share their story. So we're happy about that. How the story basket exhibit came about is interesting in that I was just talking to Julie on the phone and sharing with her our recollection of 2.5 years ago when we first met. Julie and Bernadine Phillips, who's here, and as it turns out, it's her longtime friend and cousin. And both Bernadine and Julie came down to the museum at our invitation, actually the invitation of Corky Broaddus. Corky was on our board. Many of you know Corky, longtime person here in the community, anchor. And Julie says to them, Bernadine and Julie, well, what I want to do is invite you to this meeting because you're going to be consultants to the museum because they want to expand the story of the Piscosa. We knew that when we looked at what we had, it needed more. It just really lacked. And so we needed to make that connection. So Julie and Bernadine came down, and it was just a great opportunity to do that. At that meeting, and this ties into the story baskets, Julie says, well, I'm working on a project. I've got story baskets that I'm creating. She told us about that. And it was at that meeting that we decided this could be a really cool exhibit. And as it turned out, here's the exhibit, and that's proof that it ended up very well. They're very colorful, the stories within that Julie shares and has written in her book are very fascinating to us. And we're very thankful for that. Let's see, I wanted to just show you that Julie's story baskets really are the first step at sharing the Piscosa story. We've got plans here, and we've already raised a lot of funds. We're really pleased. We've had 2 grants and a wonderful gift of money. So we're about halfway to our project, but this is the way, thank you. This is the way the current exhibit looks, which you can see here is very small. And it only has pictures of the past. So the goal here with the basket exhibit, which back here is to show the present. So that's a whole, this is on the far end of the present, but we want to fill in between. So I think we're going to be very successful at that. We're doing some things here. This is where the footprint is of the Piscosa exhibit, very small compared to the rest of the museum. And eventually where we're going to go is we're going to remove our greeters kiosk. We're going to move that out of there, create this space, and we're going to fill it in here. So it'll be quite larger. We're very happy to have that space that'll be available, again, to welcome people to the museum and share the story of past and present of the Piscosa people. So there's that. This display of Julie's baskets, we don't get to keep them permanently, but that's okay. They're moving on, and they'll be on display through the end of this year. Julie has her book that we received a wonderful grant to have these published. The publication was made possible through the Woods Family Music and Arts Grant, which was received through the Community Foundation of North Central Washington. Julie is donating the proceeds of this book. Every dollar will go toward expanding that same Piscosa exhibit. So we're very thankful for that, and we appreciate the generosity of Julie to do that toward this exhibit. So at any rate, here's Julie back. And I'm going to turn this over to Julie and let her start her program. And thank you very much again, Julie. And here you go. You got your all mic'd up, and I'll get off the stage. Thank you.
Este Quinchut, Julie Edwards, Intum Quinchut, Cynthia Manuel, in Ashtum Quinchut, Fred Manuel, Kias Quinchut, I, Lucy Sluiskin, Ishtatilis Quinchut, I, Joseph Sluiskin. So I gave you a really brief introduction. Traditionally, that's how we would introduce ourselves to new people. We tell them who our people are. So I just told you who my mom, my dad, my grandmother, and my grandfather are. And then my grandma, when I was little, she would always tell me, when you go out into public, you be good. Because when you do something wrong, they don't say, oh, look what Julie did. They say, look what Lucy's granddaughter did. So that's one of the important things, is to always, when I introduce myself, tell people who I am and who I come from. So this book is actually a funny story. My partner in crime over there, Bernadine Phillips, she's the, what was it you called us earlier? Thelma and Louise. So I don't know if I'm Thelma or I'm Louise, but this is us. So the two of us were sitting at a table with a couple of their basket weavers, and we were looking through our Facebook, as a lot of us like to do. And there was this cool grant thing, mentorship. And I was like, hey, Bernadine, will you be my mentor? And she, without hesitation, no, you don't mind. Talk about hurt my feelers. Yeah. She says, why don't you ask Joe Feddersen? I don't know if you all know who Joe Feddersen is. He's a really famous, he works in glass, he works in prints, he makes baskets. He has most of his artwork, it comes out of the Froelich Gallery in Oregon. Right now, he's got multiple shows going. He just did one in New York. He's getting ready to have a show in the Smithsonian. He's getting ready out at the MAC to do, I don't remember what they call it, but when they review your whole life's work, he's doing one of those. So he's really, actually a really special guy with some serious talent. I'd met him a few years back going to a basket conference, and he was kind of funny because he's a really tall, elderly man. And we were standing there and Bernadine says, look, there's Joe Feddersen. And I was like, Joe Feddersen. She goes, look. So Joe Feddersen standing there, and he's really shy, just the sweetest gentleman ever. And I was like, hi, nice to meet you. You know, and we watched a bunch of these women from like in their 20s to like their 60s. And they're all standing there. Oh my gosh, look, there's Joe Feddersen. And Joe's just, he's getting embarrassed. And finally they come over, and I was like, wow, he really is famous. That's kind of cool, because we're out in the middle of nowhere and there's these people just getting really excited over Joe Feddersen. So anyway, he grabs, I was making a basket, and it was like this round and about this tall. And he says, do you mind if I look at your basket? And I was like, sure. I was still fairly new in my basket weaving. He grabs the basket and he looks up in the sky and he starts doing this to my basket. And I got kind of weirded out. And I was like, Bernadine, what's he doing to my basket? We laughed, but that's how we got to know each other. So anyway, Bernadine, fast forward again, Bernadine says, well, why don't you ask Joe to be your mentor? I didn't think that was even a possibility because he's Joe Feddersen. So I texted Joe, like right that instant, Joe, will you be my mentor, please? I didn't expect anything back. 10 seconds later, my phone rang and it was Joe. And he says, yes. So that was the start of my adventure with Joe Feddersen. For 1 year, we spent 1 year together, and I had to spend so many hours a month with him. And the project that we'd proposed was to do 8 baskets that had a story to go with them. And then after we did the books and stories, we had to do professional photography, get them pictures, and then put them all together and put them in a book. So I really thought that the baskets were going to be the toughest part of it. It wasn't. It was the publishing. That was the tough part. I went to go see a few elders and ask them, because I was going to try to do go through the tribe, but there's a process and it would have taken too long. So I went directly to these elders and asked them to give me some funny, not necessarily true, but entertaining stories that they knew, that they'd heard, that were safe to share. And Casaus Ernie Brooks, he's an elder, and he's from Nispelem. His family's also Wenatchi. And Adrian Home, of course, Joe Feddersen, and then I had my stories. So we all kind of collaborated. They gave me the stories, and they didn't really, like, one, she kind of wrote it out, but she's like, that's the gist of it. You can figure it out. I was like, okay. So I had to write all these stories. Then once I wrote the stories, then I had to come up with an idea of how I was going to portray these stories in basket form. And that's these baskets. And that actually wasn't all that difficult. They kind of did themselves. I picked out the colors, I picked out the designs, I gridded everything out. And it only actually took me maybe a week per basket. It was amazing. Like I said, they made themselves. And Joe was there the whole way. When I had questions, when I'd start, I'd send him pictures, you know, it's like, what do you think? Do you like this? And you know, he always had some. It was really exciting to be treated like I was really special and I was like a brand newbie in basketry. But because I was with Joe, just all these doors opened up. I got to go see old regalia and old cedar baskets and corn husk bags. And wow, the information that I took in was just, I thought my head was going to pop off. It was just amazing to see the beautiful items in all these museums. Because he took me to the Mac, he took me to the Gint, he took me to there's another couple in Seattle that we went to. And then we went to do some other fun stuff. We went to like the Museum of Music and Pop Art. We went and looked in there at that kind of art. And so he kind of schooled me in every kind of art there was that you could look at. We did a lot of really fun, cool stuff. And sometimes we just hung out and made baskets. You know, he'd show me different ways to start them, different ways to end them. But that was kind of in between things. And then we started the process of making the book. And this is really interesting because at the time, the residential schools hadn't really come up yet. So orange wasn't anything that was special. When we were finishing up, you know, we had printed off a book to see how the pictures played out. And I think we ended up printing off 3 books that have many mistakes in them. Well, I got to the point we finally hashed everything out. And he says, well, pick a color. So I was kind of going, and it landed and it came out orange. The book came out orange. And he says, are you sure you want to pick that color? And I was like, I don't know, I'm feeling it. And he's like, orange? I was like, I don't know, I'm feeling it. And he's like, all right, okay. So we went through the process of getting the book published. We got that first batch of like, I think we ordered 10. When we opened the first one up and was like, and he's like, are you sure you want that orange? And I was like, I'm telling you, I'm feeling it. So we found it, we looked at it, and the book was beautiful. I mean, wow, just stopped me in my tracks. Like, wow, I did that. We did that. He's like, no, you did it. I just stood around and watched and enjoyed you floundering around a little bit because it was cute. And we laughed. And then we had to go do a couple things. So we couldn't be there when the first big order came in. It was like, I don't know, 240 books. It was like these 10, 15 boxes. It was amazing to see. And we got back and they were all piled up. He's like, come look at it. That was an astounding feeling to have those books all sitting there just waiting to be opened. And so that was kind of the journey of the book. And like Matt said, you know, we went as consultants to go talk about the Piscuaos and hopefully help to open doors, you know, so people could see us, not just as we were, but who we are today, you know, that we're still here, that we're still vital, that we're still doing things, that we're still trying to be good caretakers of the land, that we're still trying to be progressive. And Corky, I blame Corky. I blame everything on Corky because she keeps getting us into things. We just did a dangerous women thing, and that's because of the relationships that we've built in Leavenworth, to start with Matt and Corky at the fish hatchery and Salmon Fest and all of those things. But the exhibit itself, wow, that was quite the endeavor, because I was getting emails like every day. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? What kind of stands do we need? As far as I was concerned, I didn't know anything. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Sure. Uh-huh. Yeah, whatever you think. You know, and I know that they really wanted more help than that, but I really wasn't capable of helping them very much because I didn't really know much about setting things up like that. And when I actually got to go in there and see it, I couldn't even, it was beautiful. Fortunately, I was really lucky because prior to moving to Leavenworth, my basket exhibit was in Grand Coulee at the Tribal Museum. And I put it there to see how they would set it up. And they had these really cool glass cases where they put like 4 in at a time, and they were kind of, and I thought that was really cool. They had little pedestals, so each one of them, you could see each one all the way around. And then when I went in there, I showed Matt, so they kind of had an idea what worked really well. But when I actually went to Leavenworth and saw the museum set up in that small space, they were just like, wow, there was so much color. They were so bright. And then to read those signs, this standing here in front of people and talking about myself is really difficult because it's culturally not what we do, because we're not supposed to brag about ourselves or anything like that. It usually that gets you a slap in the ears, you know, but because what we're doing is something that's promoting our people, because people don't recognize that we're here. Bernadine and I have been really stepping out beyond our boundaries. And I keep throwing Bernadine under the bus and saying her name because she's just as guilty as I am. And it's a good guilt. You know, we're happy to be here. We're happy to promote the Pequot's people. And we're proud to be Pequot's people. And I just absolutely am so happy at the reception that we have in Leavenworth. So happy that we were able to come here and feel like we're at home. It's a great place. I love that the museum was so open and willing to exhibit the baskets. And how much time do I have? So I've pretty much gone through the basket process of how we got from point A to point B. While I have a little bit of time here, do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am. Can I look at one of the books? Oh, that one.
Can you walk us through the evolution of how you learned these stories throughout your childhood?
Okay, so we have the rock story is a story that comes from me. When I was little, we lived by the seasons. I was pretty much a migrant child raised by grandparents. My grandmother in the spring, first thing, roots, punku, sputlum, all these different roots, we would go digging. And I remember being really little and, just trotting around behind my grandma. She made me a little bitty root digger, and I had little bags that were just mine. When I picked berries, I carried that first little metal cup, the kind with little dots on it. That was my first huckleberry basket. The story that's in here, the rock story comes about because I was, sorry about all my ums, I was a fetal alcohol baby. So I had a lot of anger management issues. And when we were in the mountains, my grandma would never physically discipline me because the mountains were sacred. And my grandma always told me, when you're in the mountains, you don't go run around and be loud because you'll wake the mountains up. I think she meant the volcanoes. So we had to, so I had to kind of keep it down. And if she was going to discipline me, it usually happened with the story. So this story, I was learning how to identify the roots that we were digging. And she had dug a root and it had the top and the root on it. And she put it in my hand and she said, this is what you're looking for. So she showed me by taking the root and she'd match the top. She'd say, go match the top. So you just go from plant to plant. You look, does that look like that one? That one? Until we got to one that looked, and she goes, see, that matches. See how it matches? See how that's the same? Now you dig that up. And that's how I learned how to dig roots. Well, this particular root was an Indian carrot. And they have these kind of grass blade-like tops. And I was not seeing it. I was not seeing it at all. And I got really frustrated. I had a really, being little, 5 or 6 years old, I didn't have a really long attention span to begin with. And I got really frustrated really fast, threw myself on the ground, started kicking around and screaming, crying. And my grandma came over and she says, what are you doing? And I stopped, because I thought I was going to get a whooping. Didn't get a whooping. She says, go over there and go find me a rock. She says, one you can fit in your pocket. So I was still mad and had my coconut face on. That's my coconut face. So I walked over and, kicked the ground a little bit and was just being a little naughty little kid. But I knew I better get it done here quick. So I walked over there and I started looking and slowly changing my mood. And then I found one. I was like, oh, that's a good rock. So I went back. I was all happy because I did something my grandma asked me to do. And I showed her the rock. And she says, okay. She says, I want you to go over there, sit down, and I want you to go put your mat in the rock. My grandma had never told me anything that I couldn't do. She'd never sent me on a mission that I couldn't complete. So I figured, well, I guess I'm gonna go put my mat in the rock. So I went over and I sat down and I stared at it. Made faces at it, rubbed it on my face, rubbed it on my chest, rubbed it on my hands, until I didn't feel like I was mad anymore. So then I took the rock back over and I ran over there and I, grandma, my mad's in the rock. She goes, okay, put it in your pocket and save it for later. She goes, you can get your mad out later when we have time for you to be mad. It's like, okay, go dig roots. So I did. So we got home later that evening and we were unpacking the car, all the goodies. My grandma always had this white bucket and it had Spam and corned beef and all the things I couldn't eat at home. The only time we got to eat those was when we went root digging or huckleberry picking. And I was really just kind of in a good mood. It was a good day. I'd forgotten all about the rock. So she's packing stuff in and she says, go get your rock out and go get your mat out and go look at it. So grabbed my rock and I went out and sat and started looking at my rock. And I was like, okay. And I couldn't feel that mad anymore. I was like, So I put it on my head and I rubbed it in my hand. I sat there and tried to will the mad back out. And I couldn't make myself get mad again. I couldn't remember why I was mad. I was like, wow. So my grandma, I'm still sitting here in front of my grandma, yells, supper. So I went in, ate supper, and we got the dishes done, and my grandma sat down to crochet. I went and sat down next to her, and I said, Grandma, I can't get the mad back out of the rock. She says, She says, well, she says, when you get mad like that, you take that mad and you put it in a rock. And then later, when you have time, you pull it back out. And if you find the mad, then the mad was meant to be felt. But then when you feel it and you recognize it, then you give it to Creator so he can heal it. But if you can't find the mad, then it was never worth being mad. You just let it go. And that was my rock story. That was my grandma. See that yellow under the salmon? That's the rock basket. They're actually horned-toed lizards. Yeah. Yeah, that was the other part that made me mad too. I was chasing horned-toed lizards around and I kept missing them. Those things are so cool. You know, if you lay them on their back and you rub their belly, they go to sleep. Just saying. Yeah, it's pretty fun. They're awesome. Awesome little creatures. And they don't bite. I mean, they probably do, but they don't bite hard, I guess. So those were my stories, were my grandma's stories. You know, she was a big part of me trying to learn patience. And that was how she dealt with my fetal alcohol and my anger management issues, is learning how to compartmentalize. And that was really important for me, especially after I got older and became a law enforcement officer. You can't get mad when you're a cop. I mean, you can, but man, it could be really bad for you. Casaus, he told a story, and his was about coyotes, and it's just a funny story. That one you're gonna have to read because it's so short, but it's like a little joke. The grizzly bear story was another one of my grandma's stories. We went huckleberry picking, and we used to always go to Stampede Pass, or we'd go to Potato Hill, and there's a lot of lakes up there. And my grandma taught me how to creek fish first, and then I learned how to fish in the river. But I was lucky enough that when we went to go do that stuff, I got to catch dinner, and that was always awesome to me. So if I made my quota of huckleberries, she would let me go fish. Well, she says, well, do you want to catch dinner tonight? And I was like, yeah. She said, well, then you need to fill your bag up 3 times. I can do that. So I went and filled up my bags, picked as fast as I could, and I was just picking any old way. There are leaves and stems and everything in there, you know. And I poured it in the white bucket. That was the big bucket. And I ran over to my grandma and said, can I go fishing? And she looked at it and she goes, She goes, sit down. I knew your story was coming. I was in trouble. She says, a long time ago, Coyote had 2 wives. One was Black Bear and one was Grizzly Bear. She said, Black Bear was a wonderful, wonderful wife. Everything she cooked tasted good. Her children were well-mannered, and they played quietly with each other. And her house was always clean. And when she picked berries, she dug roots, everything was always good. His other wife, Grizzly Bear, she was mean. She was always yelling. She was loud. Her house was always a mess. Her kids were running amok. And she always burned the food because she was always in a hurry. You know, it's just like night and day. So one day Coyote came back from his travels, because, you know, Coyote, he liked to travel. He liked to go all kinds of places. Well, he finally came back to visit his wife and his kids. And he went to Black Bear's house first. Well, you know how the TP telegraph is, didn't take very long, and his other wife heard that Coyote was at the other wife's house. So boy, she went storm Grizzly Bear. She went storming over to Black Bear's house, and They started in. Pretty soon, black bear and grizzly bear were fighting out in the yard, and the kids are running around and screaming and screeching. And Coyote says, "Hey, knock it off. Hold on. Just stop it." So they both stop. He says, "I'm going to give you both a task, and whoever does the task the best, I'll live with them." So they both agreed. So he says, "I want each of you to go get me a basket of huckleberries." So they're like, "Okay." So Black Bear went out and she took her time, and while she wasn't slow, but she was meticulous about her berry picking. There were no leaves, no stems. She'd pick a little bit and she'd dig all that stuff out, and she'd pick a little more, but she picked clean. All you seen in there was those nice, pretty, shiny black huckleberries. Well, grizzly bear, she picked like a grizzly bear. She'd take her claws and just went. There were stems and berries and leaves, and we weren't sure if there was more leaves or there was more huckleberries. It was terrible. So they go back to the house, and Black Bear, she presents her huckleberries. And Coyote looks at them and raises his eyebrow, and he sets them down. Grizzly Bear comes over. She shows him her huckleberry bucket, and Coyote picks out some leaves. And then my grandma looks at me. She stops telling the story and she looks at me and she says, "So who do you think he was going to live with?" I was like, "I get it. So I need to go pick like Black Bear." So that was, and you can ask Bernadine now. I'll sit on the side of the road and pick everything out of my basket. It's pretty funny. So that was another one of those teaching moments where my grandma taught me how important it was to be respectful of what I was picking, what I was taking home, what I was presenting to my family, how I picked my huckleberries. Now I'm kind of slow, and so I don't get too excited about it. I'll find some base, plop down and just pick one at a time. And then I'll sit there for a while longer and pick all the leaves out. And those are the kinds of stories that I thought were fun and I thought would be good to make baskets out of, because they were good visuals. The basket that I made to represent the bears is a huckleberry color. The back is a huckleberry color, and the top is a grizzly bear paw. And you can tell it's a grizzly bear paw because all of the toes are even and they go across. That one, that's the grizzly bear paw, and it's an actual representation of a real grizzly bear paw. And then the bottom is a black bear, because the black bear's a lot more rounder. He doesn't have the hump on his neck. So that was a pretty easy visual for me to describe black bear and grizzly bear. And this is my grandmother. And she was born here. Well, she was born in Kashmir. So she's actually from here. And it's really awesome to come here. And she used to tell me stories about growing up here and riding in a wagon. Oh my gosh. Traveling and it taking 3 days to get from here to Toppenish. It's like, oh my gosh, really? Like, I can't even imagine, as I'm sitting in the back with my headphones, my battery pack, eating popcorn and Snickers, drinking soda. And she said, yep. She said we would stop every night and we'd camp, build a fire. And she said that those were some of her best memories, was traveling different places. She told me about stories. She was an orphan. Both her parents died. Her mother died in childbirth with her youngest brother, and her dad was murdered. And she liked to tell stories after she became an orphan, she was kind of moved around between her brothers and sisters, and she had a really big family. And she'd tell stories about the language, like going to, she went down to Celilo and they were cutting fish. And it wasn't just the Indians from Oregon and Southern Washington, you know, all of the tribes would converge down there and they would fish and they would dry their fish and they would, you know, do all those things to prepare for the winter. And she said one day she was responsible for helping clean the kitchen and the table. And these two old ladies were sitting in there and they were talking about her in a different language and they thought she didn't understand them. And they were like, oh, look at that dumb girl. Don't even know how to wash the table right. And they were saying all kinds of mean things, just entertaining themselves. So my grandma's wiping this table down and she's, you know, doing what she's supposed to be doing. And her aunt comes in. And her aunt had been standing by the door and she'd heard those two old ladies. So to kind of be spiteful, her aunt started talking in their language to my grandma. And she said, it was so fun because their faces just turned white. And they were, oh. So my husband and I, fast forward, my husband and I had to go because I had hurt my ankle. I had to go see a doctor specialist in Spokane. And we went to this Starbucks. And we're sitting at these high chairs. And there's a couple over here that are speaking French. There's a couple over here speaking Spanish. And there was this other couple over here that it sounded like they were speaking some sort of Middle Eastern, like Farsi or something. And I was sitting there looking at him. I said, look at that. He's like, what? He's drinking his coffee. He's like, what? And I said, listen to them. They're talking their own language. They could be talking about us and we'd never know. I said, and them, the French. I said, I have no idea what they're saying. We, you know, we giggled. I said, that could be us. He goes, what do you mean? That could be us talking in our own language. That could be us. I said, this is our country. This is where our blood is, and we can't even talk our own language. And I was so disgusted with myself. And I think that was the very first time that I realized I wanted to learn my language. And so here I am now. I can introduce myself properly. Okay.
Can you tell me what your baskets are made out of?
These are made out of polished hemp and acrylic yarn. Mar?
Yeah, Julie, could you talk about what you're doing for an encore? Are you still weaving baskets? Are you doing other art projects? Can you talk a little bit about what you're working on now or your plans?
Now that it's warmed up, I'm going to try to go do some printing. I love Bigfoot. He is so cool. Or we call him Shwanitum. Maybe another time. We're running out of time here, but I plan on making some cards and doing some prints and doing some language stuff. You know, I'm practicing writing my language, learning my alphabet and such. So I'm going to be doing some printing, and I'm always making baskets, trying to perfect the art. It's ongoing. Just, you know, learning how to use different types of twine, learning how to make small ones, big ones, flat bags. I want to eventually get better at making corn husk bags, making hats, using multiple colors. I mean, there's so many aspects to basket making, so many types of basket making, and I just am trying to be better. Oh, teaching classes. Yes, teaching classes. We teach a lot of classes. Trying to work with the language, trying to work in language, trying to promote language learning. That's pretty much what I'm doing, which keeps me working on dangerous women with dangerous women. We're just staying busy all the time. And if it's not something that's for me, then me and Bernadine are doing something for Bernadine, because Bernadine, she's got her own thing going on. She talks about the Wenatchi people, and she's got a whole class that she should probably do again. Hint, hint, Josh. Any other questions?
So since the exhibit at the Greater Leavenworth Museum is scheduled to leave at the end of this year, do you have other places that you're having lined up for showings?
I'm right now, it's looking like they're going to be going down to the Yakama Nation Museum. I'm hoping. We haven't got that hashed out yet. Schedules have been really hard, but I'm hoping to get them into the Junt and the Mac and the Burke. I'm working with Jackie Cook, and she's trying to open some doors for me to get them so that they can be shown in some of those bigger venues. And I'm really excited about that. I think that would be awesome to be able to walk into Burke and go, that's mine. I made those. Yes, ma'am.
For those of you who missed Dangerous Women, it's a great show. And Julie was the one who provided the invocations at each season of the moon. And it was so moving. And so would you please tell us what you said?
I didn't. I don't have the-
And what, tell us a bit about how you felt about being part of Dangerous Women.
It was an honor doing the Dangerous Women. We started out as consultants. Keeps using that word. And as we went along, we learned about pioneers, and they were, the other group members were interested in how we as Native women fared in our country here. And we educated each other about each other. And part of that was expressing to the group how important prayer was to us. We prayed, we pray about everything. We stop, we pray. We eat, we pray. We're confused, we pray. We're lost, we pray. We pray about everything. Prayer is one of those really special things to us. My grandma always told me, if it seems like a good thing, stop, pray. Prayer is one of those things that gives you time to reflect on what the question is. Prayer is one of those special things that gives you time. You can go over it in your mind, and you can thank Creator for that ability to stop and think about your decision before you do something rash. Prayer is so important to your daily life. So the prayers that we did in the show for Dangerous Women, they reflected what was going on in that scene for that season. And I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head because I did not bring it with me. And I did learn the prayers. I wrote the prayers, and then I went back to one of my mentors, Casaus, Ernie Brooks, and he translated them for me. And then he spoke them for me so that I could learn them. And we did that relatively late because there was so many time constraints, and we were still, it was really late when we really got to figure out what we were doing and how we were doing it for Dangerous Women. So by the time that I got what she wanted as far as the prayers and stuff, it was close to time for us to be actually doing some stuff. So we got the prayers translated, and that was like, 2 months ago? So by the time I got the prayers, and then I was learning how to say them and pray them, my language is really limited. So I have the gist of what they are, but I couldn't tell you verbatim what they mean. But I can say them, that kind of thing. And so between now and the next the next performance, which is hopefully going to be next year, I will be saying them once every day so that I won't have to think about them anymore. Because the very first prayer that I spoke, I say it every day. That's the beginning of my day. And then I don't hesitate or have to think about it too hard when I say the prayer. Because I know what I'm saying, and I've said it so many times that it just comes out, and I am giving it to Creator the way it's supposed to be, from my heart. I don't have to think about it. Any other questions?
Are there any like rules to passing down stories? Do you have to follow any protocols?
That is an excellent question. If they're not your stories, then there are a lot of rules, because most of these stories belong to families. So these stories that I tell, I got permission from specific people in those families and their elders. And as you know, if you're an elder, nobody really questions you. It's like I said, okay. But if it's like outside of your family and you don't have an elder from that group that you can ask their permission to tell their story, then it's a big no-no. So you can't just go telling people stories. If they're your own story, you can tell them all day long. Does that answer your question? Okay.
I think that storytelling is such a wonderful art that to learn to do, that we could do more with our own families. And you do it so naturally. And I'm just wondering how we would get started in doing more of that in our, when we have dinner and when we have family time. I think it's just such a wonderful tradition. I would like to copy it. And I would like your advice on how to do that, or how to begin to do it.
You start with the gift of gab. You just start talking. Start talking to people, ask them things. I spent a lot of time outside. I did 20 years in law enforcement. I did 16 years as a game warden, and then the rest as a police. You deal with a lot of unhappy people. We never get called to like birthday parties, and it's like, hey, we're having cake, come on out. We don't get that. It's hey, my brother and sister are fighting and they're about to stab each other. Those are the kinds of things we get called to. So you get people who are really upset. And what I learned really fast is they don't see me. They don't see my face. They don't know who I am. All they see is that badge. And they just hate on that badge bad. So it gets to a point where you have to start talking fast, start talking quick. And you get the gift of gab, and if you can make them laugh, you can make them smile, stuff will change really fast. And that's kind of where a lot of it came from. But as a kid, my grandma would always ask me, so what'd you think? Did you see Coyote? What'd the lizard say to you? And I could come up with anything. She'd ask me, or she'd give me the day. She'd say, see that ridge? Don't go past that. See that creek? Don't go past that. See that grass over there? That's funny color? Yeah, don't go past that. And when the sun gets straight up in the sky, that's when you can eat your bacon and egg sandwich. It's in the tinfoil in your little backpack. Okay. When the sun hits the top and it's looking over and you can see it in your eyes, you better be within yelling distance. There was a lot of visuals when I grew up. I didn't get to spend a whole bunch of time in front of the tube like kids do today. We had 4 channels until I was, I didn't have more than 4 channels until years after I moved out of my house. So I didn't even get to watch Cinemax or HBO or anything until I was an adult. All my friends had video games and, cool stuff like that. But my grandparents were old school. You don't need that. Go outside and play. Get out. So, and being kind of an only child, my brother and sister were a lot older than me. So I was pretty much on my own with 2 old people for most of my life. So I had to get really creative, sit in the corner, entertain myself, sit in a chair and entertain myself, talk to the spiders, talk to the, whatever was available, and I learned to talk to my grandparents because they were the only ones that were there to talk to. So my grandpa he liked to sing. He liked to sing stick game songs, and he was constantly going like this. Oh, and that's what I'd hear. That's what I went to sleep to. That's what I woke up to. And he liked to beat his tin cup with the spoon. Bing, 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 bing. So we just, as a kid, you start to have visuals of things. And for me, it was a visual thing. I could see letters in my head, when I'd read stuff, when I needed to bring them up, they come back as visuals. Everything is visual to me. I'm really visual. So that's how my stories started out. Is my grandpa would ask me a silly question, I'd tell him a silly story, and he'd laugh and he'd say, "That was a good one." And I like being outside, and I like to think happy things because that put me in a good mood. And I was always by myself, so it helped if I could put myself in a good mood. When you're little, when you're really small, as a baby, you hold a baby and you go, and that's how I went to sleep. So even as an adult, my husband can attest to this. My foot is always going like this when I'm trying to put myself to sleep. And he laughs and he's like, what on earth are you doing? And I was like, I'm and he goes, what? I said, I'm trying to put myself to sleep and I can't sleep. And he's like, are you serious? I was like, yep. And he'd say, okay, well, put yourself to sleep. We play this little game. So I'm laying there and I'm kicking my foot. I'm going, And then pretty soon he was, so all of those memories as a kid and moving forward, they all come into play. And that's a funny story. My husband hates that story. He's like, God, don't be telling people that. He thinks that's pretty funny. And he always tells me, he's like, when you're gone, it's so hard to sleep because there's nobody going, So anyway, any other questions? Okay.
Can you tell us where your classes are being taught?
Oh, July, July 9th and 10th, and they'll be here.
So it's in this building, 9th and the 10th, which is a weekend. And you can either do a one-day class or both days. And if I understand that, Julie, you're teaching two separate basket making.
Yeah, if you do the first day, we usually teach the round basket first, and they're little baskets. And then if you decide to come back the second day, then we teach the flat basket. Yep.
And there still are some openings in the class. I don't know how many, but it is limited in the numbers. And it's been, so July. You can register online, but Wenatchi River Institute, you can just go onto our website and there's a link right there to register.
Yeah, I've taught Head Start. Head Start, if I'm gonna have a Head Start kid though, I need to know so I can buy me some red Solo cups. Because it takes a little bit of, you have to be able to use your fingers, some dexterity. So I have to make bigger strings for the little guys. So then they're just practicing the movement as opposed to, learning the whole basket thing. They're just practicing the twining part. But it's good for all ages. My grandma always told me, idle hands do the devil's work. So I was always doing something, needlepoint, crocheting. She always had me doing something because she said if I wasn't doing something, then I was up to no good. which wasn't true. Just totally not true. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your support. I thank you for coming out. Thank you, Wenatchee River Institute. Thank you to Bernadine Phillips for driving Miss Daisy. And I hope that you'll go visit my exhibit at the museum, because the museum is really cool. It has some wonderful historical information in it, not just about natives, but about Leavenworth and how it came to be. And I'm just so happy and proud that y'all came out. Thank you so much.